how bad does it have to be until you make the change, until you come out and say, no more, this ends with me? I was face down on the floor getting punched by my kids and my ex, so bad that the diamond came out of my engagement ring.
This is Eagle Freedom Presents.
Michelle Rogers was once face down on the floor, surviving a life of toxic abuse and trauma that started when she was just a child. She was told she was the problem, that she was unworthy. But today, Michelle runs 7 successful companies and is building a ranch to help others find the voice she once lost. Today on Eagle Freedom Presents, we're going inside that before and after. We're talking about the moment time split in two, the question that changed her life, which is a very important question, and how she moved from a survival mindset to building an empire. Michelle, it is an honor to have you here.
Well, it is an absolute honor for me to be on your show. And I will have to say, we've said it before, I'll say it again. Our last names are amazing. How could this connection not happen? So thank you for this.
Exactly. When your name popped up on my list, I said, well, there we go. How can we not do this? So anyway, thank you again very much for joining me on the podcast. And let's jump right into it. Obviously, we don't want to get too much details, but we do want to talk about the past because the past is what makes us. So tell us about life growing up for you.
Well, let me start out. As a child, you don't know any different. You only know what you're growing up with. So life to you is, that's life. That's what you think it is. And my growing up, it was very toxic. It was very traumatic. There was a lot of verbal, physical, sexual abuse. There was at one point in my life that, I feared for my life. And my mother tried to kill me. I, at that point afterwards, was sent off to a boarding school up in upstate New York. And I do the quotation marks because they tout themselves as a home for troubled teenagers. That facility in that boarding school has since been shut down because it's been investigated for a lot of, the abuses and things that I had endured also there. That was in my late teens. I graduated from that school up in upstate New York and did what society in the, late 80s, early 90s told women we had to do, which was, you got married, you were barefoot, you were pregnant, you were in the kitchen. And, that's what I did. I wanted to go to college. I actually wanted to go to Cornell University for biology. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And then, just going through having 3 children, through a toxic marriage. And again, you don't realize that there's other ways of living out there. And you're literally just surviving because that's all you're taught. That's all you know. So every decision that you make is based on that. So then we talked about the time that split in two. So there was a moment in my marriage that the police were called for domestic violence and I left. And that was the moment that split time in two for me. It was the before and it was the after. And that really started my journey of finding myself, who I am. And I do believe that the universe puts people in your path and in your way for a reason. And we can get into that more, but that's just the overarching background of where I've come from.
So how do you take that information as an early child and learn that that's not the way life is supposed to be?
So there's always something inside of me, and I want to say that little small voice. But that little small voice isn't really a little small voice. Sometimes it's a yearning. Sometimes it's I know this isn't right and there's something more. You know, Kids have hopes, they have dreams. When I was younger, I wanted to be a horseback rider and I wanted to go to Devon, which is a big, huge horse show here in Pennsylvania. And that was like my goal. So children have dreams and when you're going through trauma, I, as a child, questioned a lot. And that's actually what I got myself into a lot of trouble was because I didn't just take the status quo and take it for what it was worth. I questioned and I was like, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand this. I don't understand that, which then got more beatings. And I think that mindset, though, is what helped propel me to constantly continue to question. And when I did get out of my marriage and went through the divorce, I questioned, well, who am I? What's my purpose? These people have always told me I'm worth nothing. I tried committing suicide 3 times in my life. They would tell me that I'm better off dead. Well, but then why am I here? So, I really think for me, it was the stick to itiveness and the just damn darn determination that I'm going to prove them wrong. Because when I did get out of my marriage, that was it. I was like, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to prove them all wrong. And then as you heal, that changes.
You were talking about when you got out of this marriage, this toxic marriage that you were in. One of the hardest things for you to do when you were leaving this marriage was the fact that you had the kids and you were fearful of removing them from what they thought was a stable home, right?
So that's actually one of the hardest things that I have done, which was recognize that my ex was a good dad. He was a good dad to the kids, and our relationship and we were toxic and he was toxic. So I actually left my children with him to maintain that stable environment, to keep them in their home, to keep them in their school. And I left because I didn't want the upset of removing them from their school, removing them from their safety, from the place that they've known their entire lives, to the detriment of my relationships with them now. At this point, I believe that they've expressed that I'm the problem. I'm the reason why dad was never happy. And it became this dynamic of bad guy, good guy. And I shielded the children a lot from a lot of what was happening between him and I. Even as we talk about, what I say is the night that changed everything. There's before this and there's after this. Even their perception now of that whole night and that whole incident doesn't take into account the months and months of things that were building up to that point, and then even the dynamic of how that fight happened. There is such thing as called reactive abuse. And it's when someone, pushes and pushes and pushes, and they do it in a way that, from the outside, oh, it just looks okay. Or, oh, like they're not making it a big deal. But to you, they've pushed you to the point where now all you do is explode. All you do is react. And they do that to then make mom look crazy or to make this other person look bad. And then they sit back and they're like, well, I didn't do anything. All I did was keep asking these questions. And, that was a toxic pattern that happened over and over again.
Leading that relationship though allowed you to actually start taking control of your life, right? It gave you that opportunity. And you went through what you called 3 years of self-discovery. So tell us about that important journey and tell us what you learned about yourself in that journey.
Oh my goodness. That journey was the hardest journey. That journey was harder than leaving that marriage, let me tell you, because you are relearning everything about yourself. You're coming up against, all these things that you thought your life was, that thought was true. And you're being shown, you're looking at yourself in this mirror and having to take accountability for not only what you've done, how you've acted, how you show up in the world, and trying to change all of that at the same time. So that was massive. And I actually feel that I went through the 6 steps that I write about in the book. And, the very first step is I had to see the truth. I had to hold that mirror in front of my face and say, who is this person? And I hated the person that looked back in the mirror. And I was determined I was going to change that. And then the second one is, how do I find safety? Because I was looking for safety everywhere else. I was people pleasing. I was hyper vigilant. I'm the oldest daughter out of the family. So I was parentified. So who can I learn and lean on to feel safe, to actually feel it back into my own body and to learn to love myself? So that was pretty big. And then I had to go through and start healing, seeing and healing the wounds that were inflicted on me and I inflicted on myself. And then once that I did that, and that's a lot of therapy, like EMDR, mental and emotional releases, regular talk therapy, books, classes, and finding the right people. I had 3 strong women that, man, one woman, I would complain to her and I would cry, and she would say, "You know what? You've cried, you've complained. Now put your big girl panties on and what are you gonna do next?" Like, she would never let me wallow in what it was. She always was pushing me forward. And all this is happening in 3 years. I'm still living my life. I'm still going through the divorce. I'm still trying to deal with the kids, and then that's all healing the wounds. And then you rise with power. Once you're able to do that, now you can say, "Hey, you know what? This is me. This is how I want to become." And then you start integrating what you've learned and what you've done. And that pisses people off because you're rewriting your story and they want you to stay the character in their story. So that really, you start really to see pushback in that stage. And I really did with my family, to the point where I had to put boundaries in place with my own personal family of origin. And then, the very last phase is building and empowering the community beyond yourself. It's now I've done all of this work. Now how can I help others? And how can I be of service? So that was the 3 years of really honing in and finding myself, was, I would say, probably step 1 to step 3. And then step 4, 5, and 6 has been afterwards.
Through this 3-year journey that you take, where are you in your life as far as how many years has gone by since all of this, since the childhood, to where you start feeling like, okay, now I'm starting to feel worthy. Now I'm able to take control of my life. How long of a journey was that before you actually got there?
So the ending of those 3 years, when I met my husband that I'm married to now, I was 37 years old.
So let's talk about this very important person in your life when you met your now husband, because his questions weren't questions that he asked you was so different than any question you ask somebody. So tell us about that pivotal question and that moment.
Well, the very first moment that we were together, we had met over a cup of coffee, and then we were together afterwards. And he said, "I see you." He said, "I see the 15-year-old girl you were. I see who you are now." And I went, "Who is this weirdo?" Like, what do you mean you see me? Okay, because nobody ever saw me. It was always what I could give, what they could take from me. And it was really odd that he said that he saw the 15-year-old girl, because that's when I actually went through a large portion of the trauma when I was younger. So I was like, this is weird. This is weird. So then, as I got to know him a little bit more, he asked me 2 questions. He was like, "What are your hopes and dreams? And what do you want to do with your life?" And I was like, again, who is this person? What do you mean hopes and dreams? I, who has hopes and dreams? I'm just surviving, right? And he's like, "Yeah, I want to know them and I want to know how we can make them happen." So those questions literally did another shift in my mind of, wow, people actually live differently. People think differently. There's another opportunity. There's another life out here. And it really had me start looking, and I did some introspection and I said, "You know what? I like real estate." I had been a real estate agent years ago, and there were investors that were taking these dilapidated homes in one of the cities, and they were pretty much at that time fixing and flipping them and making them, changing the dynamics of the community, and first time home buyers and children were coming in and living there. And I was like, this is great. This is awesome, because this is a opportunity where we're taking something that's bad, that's, not workable, and we're just totally transforming this. So I said, I like real estate. And, long story short, we purchased our first property. I purchased the first property for $10,000. It was a condemned property through the city that I live in. Had holes in the roof, had sewer issues, and we worked nights and weekends and renovated that house, and we rented it to a woman and child, and we still have it to this day. And that started the passion of, wow, I can do something and this makes a difference.
You said that he said, how can we make this happen? Instead of how can you make this happen? How can we? So here's the guy you first meet who you're just getting to know, and he's going, how can we make this happen? What a pivotal and important statement to make about the character of the person you're sitting across.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's relationships, it's partnership. It is, this man has been 100% totally different from what I was used to. I mean, everything that we do, it's a partnership. Everything that we talk about is structured around, how we can do this, or, other relationships, and really a community and a communal effort of getting things done. And to even take it one step further, it's who can we have around us that either helps us level up or we can level up. It really is just bringing in the community.
So let's talk about how vital the community is and finding that right tribe, especially for you in your healing process. Tell us about.
So, yes, there is this saying that the 5 people that you surround yourself, is pretty much the sum of who you are. And I will say, when I started in my 3-year journey, even when I was leaving my ex, I went to books. Books was my community because I didn't know anybody other than those 3 strong female friends. I didn't know anybody that wasn't already in my life prior. And there's a book, Dale Carnegie and then Napoleon Hill, and they talk about the 5 people in your life. And they say, if you can't find 5 people in your life, think of them. So every night I would be like, okay, this is my boardroom. I'm laying in bed. This is my boardroom. I want this person, and this person. Now, what do I think that they would tell me? And that actually became, my first 5 friends. You start attracting, when they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. You start then attracting people that are going to come into your life for different reasons, for different seasons, and some of them for a lifetime. And I know that's all cliche, and there's a reason. So community is huge, and finding that, like I said, I was laying in bed. I sought 3 people that I was like, okay, these are the people that are going to be on my boardroom. And then those people actually started to be filled in human form.
You also find what happens is the community itself changes kind of like automatically, right? Because your level, your frequency level, your energy level has changed. You're no longer, like you talked about earlier, the people that were you were with in before, they didn't like seeing you change. They wanted you back down here. But
Mhm.
as you've changed, as we change in life, we change our frequency and our energy, we see that shift in the community almost automatically happening. That's something you see.
Yes, absolutely. I actually use an analogy of the crabs in a bucket. You don't need a lid on crabs that are in a bucket because all the crabs are down at the bottom. And the moment that a crab starts climbing, you're climbing out of that environment, they don't like it. And they are going to pull you down with such force that there are limbs that are broken off of these crabs that are trying to climb out of the bucket. And that's the negative aspect of, as you're changing your frequency, as you're healing, as you're growing. We see it all the time in real estate where one partner of a couple wants to go into real estate, and they're hanging out with real estate people, and they're leveling up, and they're leveling, and then you see a dissolution of that relationship because that other person didn't go with them. They're not I don't want to say healing, but they're not getting the education at the same time. I almost went through that right now in my personal relationship because, I said, I was like, listen to him and I had a conversation. I said, I'm growing, I'm going to the next level. Um, I'm starting this other business. We have a foster child that we have right now. And this is the business that I envision that I want to start. And I said, there are things in your past that you need to heal from, you need to grow from. And I need someone that's also at this level with me. And he had to confront a few of his demons that he was dealing with. Um, he ended up in rehab a little bit. And as we went through all of that, he's now gotten to the point where he's actually changed and he's now growing. And we can now do this level together.
You touched on something really important that actually kind of helped you change your life because you thought you were fully healed by 2013, but 3 years ago, you get a nonverbal autistic little foster boy who came into your life and turned the mirror back on you, requiring you to dive into trauma informed parenting and deeper healing, like the EMDR that you spoke about. So, what is EMDR and how did helping him help you find your voice?
We became a foster family and was placed with a 5-year-old, absolutely nonverbal, autistic. He wasn't, well, he was then diagnosed with autism, developmental disabilities, and just a lot of trauma himself. So to parent someone like, a child like that, you can't parent them in the same way that I parented my kids. And a lot of the trainings that you go through are trauma informed trainings. And as I'm going through that trauma informed training, I'm like, that wound that I thought that I had healed, it's not healed. It's kind of like I say it was like peeling an onion. When you peel an onion, you have this wound and you have layers to it. And okay, I thought I peeled that layer off and it's calloused and we're good. It's healed. But nope, that wasn't quite, we that second intention of healing from the inside out didn't happen. We just healed from the outside. So yes, I mean EMDR is eye movement desensitization repetition. Oh,
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
yes, thank you. Thank you. And also somatic healing. So I went through a lot of different therapies to not only uncover and get to the root of my trauma, but also to be able to release it. And releasing is the part that you want to have because you can always get to the root and then you're revisiting it and opening up again and again and again. But when you release, then you can move forward. And that helped the way that I parent this little boy because then I can understand that his behaviors aren't necessarily him being obstinate or obtuse or whatever, oh, he's being nasty. There's a reason behind it, and if I can understand the reason behind it and then help him express what his feelings are, and we started with sign language and now he is partially verbal, then he is able to go through what he's going through and then not have that bottled up himself. He's the reason why I was able to really dive deep more and to actually release a lot. And, always some of the stuff that you go through as trauma isn't yours. It's not yours to carry. It's your parents, it's your grandparents, it's your parents' friends. Some of it as a child, you soak it all in, you take it all on. It's not yours.
Surprising was it to you to find to realize that you still hadn't dealt with the trauma?
Very, very depressing, very disappointing. It was very eye-opening because and I was pissed. I will tell you, I was mad because I had spent all this time and I did all this work and I was like, okay, I'm over it. I'm good. I'm great. I'm moving on. I'm like, I went from I have to prove to everybody to, now I'm building something and now I've got to go back. Like, no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to do that again. So I was angry at myself for having to do that. And at the same time, it was very freeing.
Imagine that would be to finally be able to truly delve down deep, to really get to it, to get it out, to deal with the trauma. So I can just imagine that freeing feeling when you've gone through it. It's like, my gosh, I can live, I can breathe now. This weight that's sitting on my chest is not there anymore.
Some of the therapy sessions were like that, I will say that, and some of them I didn't feel a difference at all. And yet, when I would come home, my husband would say to me, and my friends would say to me, "Hey, you're different. You seem different. You're showing up different." So some of the therapies I was like I'm wrecked after this. And then others it was not even perceptible to myself. And then I would look back and I'm like, wow, 6 months ago I would have made this decision, but now I'm making this decision.
We don't feel that there's the change, but outwardly, when people start seeing the change in us, they're like, wow, I didn't even realize that had happened. I didn't realize I was doing that. But it's also a reassuring that you really are taking control of your life when you hear somebody from the outside tell you that you're doing things different and it's making a difference.
Absolutely. I also went through, so Darren Hardy had this heroes program, how to become a 21st century hero. And, it also, there were exercises in there that I would have to go to my friends, to my husband, to my kids, to some of my coworkers and say, can you fill this out about me? And by the way, don't pull any punches. Like yes, I'm going to read it. And I really need someone to look at me from an objective point of view. And man, some of that was eye opening. Some of it was great. Some of it was like, that's not who I want to be. That's not how I want to show up.
What was one thing out of all that stood out most, if you can recall it, out of all the comments that came back on you? Is there one thing that just stood out? You went, okay, wait a minute, really?
So I actually still struggle with it to this day. I have what's called resting bitch face and a FAFO. If you're saying something to me and it doesn't make sense, I have this face that you can read apparently from a mile away that I'm like, I don't think you're saying this is true. That I really have to just work on my presence and my facial features before I even say anything.
You have three rules that have guided you through life: no excuses, always be learning, and take action. Explain all three of those, would you?
So, no excuses is a big one. And that takes care of the procrastination. So, if I'm sitting here and I need to cold call someone, and I hate cold calling, which I dislike it quite a bit, it's no excuses, right? I need to do this. A lot of people are going to be like, well, I really should do that therapy, but no, no buts. My vocabulary does not have buts in it. My vocabulary is an and. So the no excuses is there are no buts. But negates the what you've said before it and gives the excuse after it. And is a conjunction. So I can do this and this. So the no excuses. Always be learning is your mind is going to die if you're not constantly learning. So you have to constantly be learning, whether it's a book for your self-reflection, whether it's whatever the industry you're in at. It's I love books. I love magazines. I love reading. I love learning about somebody else's different point of view because my point of view isn't the only point of view. There are millions of other points of view. And I love reading and understanding and learning about something new and then take action. So within the learning, you can do too much learning. You can become a spreadsheet warrior, which is analysis paralysis. But you can be making a decision for 2 years because you've had all these spreadsheets or there's all these reasons why you want to make the decision, but you haven't made it yet. Just take the action. What is going to happen if you take the action? Well, one or two things. It's going to work out or it's not. And if it doesn't work out, you're learning on how to take another action to make it work out, right? So you're always learning and always taking the action to move yourself forward.
I want to switch gears here and talk about the OK Ranch. What is the OK Ranch? How does that play an important part in your life? What is it all about? Tell us about it.
So as children get older, as autistic children, developmental disability children get older, so our little guy's 8 years old. I am in my 50s. So I've got a good 42, 43 years on him. Okay. At least. Right. So by the time he is in his 40s, okay, I'm going to be 80s, 90s. Right. So I'm at some point going to die and he is still going to live. So where is he going to go? Who is going to take care of him? And there are so many of children that are living now that are in that situation. Are they going to go into an organization like a state-run facility? Like where are these children going to go? Because not everyone can afford to give them the life that they need as they get older. So OK Ranch is a cross between a retirement community, which is like independent living. Um, it has an education component to it because they're always going to be learning. They will be working on the ranch. So we'll have equine assisted therapies. We'll have chickens and goats and beef cattle and a farm which has our own CSA, which is for fruits and vegetables. And then we'll bring in like urgent care and cafes. So it will be a community, a safe community inside of a community. Because a lot like our son, he elopes, he runs. So we need to provide a safe environment for him to live independently.
Did you have a love for horses? Obviously it's a ranch. Did you grow up having a love for horses, around horses? Tell us about that.
So I love horses. When I was younger, I wanted to be a horseback rider and I wanted to compete in Devon. I would actually clean, one of my mom's friends had a horse and I would clean her house every weekend for horseback riding lessons. And then now I have 3 horses myself. 2 of them are off the track thoroughbreds. One is a retired standard bred. And then when our little foster son came to us, we actually took him to have horse lessons himself, and that helped him so much with his coordination and his balance. And I was just like, wow. So that had me going down the rabbit hole of equine therapy and how there's such a demand for all kinds of services and there's long waiting lists for these services that everyone, all these children should be able to have access to, and they don't because there's not enough.
I want to kind of shift towards the women now and the program that you've developed, the coaching program that you have in place, the Resiliency Blueprint. Tell us where this came about, where the idea for it came about, and where it is today.
The idea about the resiliency blueprint, the book, the coaching program, again, all of this, I'm going to say everything that we have created, the OK Ranch, the book, the coaching program is in direct relation to our fostering because of him, we had to learn to advocate. He didn't have a voice. He still doesn't really have a voice. So we had to become his advocates. We had to navigate, what does that look like? How does that even happen? And then along with that, dealing with my own traumas. And I looked at, okay, well, what are the steps that I went through? How did I overcome this? How did I get to where I am now? And then that is, phase 6 is building and empowering the community beyond yourself. So, what can I do to help other women to get from the surviving to, to being performing at a level that they didn't think was possible? Because I never thought that this was possible. You ask me if I was 37 years old, if I thought that this was possible. No. So the 6 steps, the coaching program is for 4 women at a time. We want to keep it small because it is very intentional. And there are triggering traumas that, women have. And what we don't want to do is to reopen those wounds and put someone back into those situations. So we want to empower them to be able to move forward, to heal, and give them, practices that they can do on their own.
I think what's really interesting, what you just touched on, is you're not looking to do a whole bunch of coaching at one time. The fact that you really want to keep it small and intimate, and is the fact that you want to really delve into each individual to make it personal, in that you want them to be able to deal with what they're going through without having a large audience, without having a large group, because it's such a important and private venture, journey that they're going on. You know,
Mhm.
you talked about going back about the person, 37 years ago, if you said, "Are you gonna be doing this?" "Oh, heck no, I can't even envision myself doing that." But if you could go back to who you were then and give one piece of advice to your younger self to shorten your or her healing time and bring her hope today, what would that be?
That would be two things. You are enough. You're absolutely enough. And the second one would be you're not crazy.
Mm.
Because my entire life, everyone said that I was crazy. To the point where, my father put me on medication because they thought I was crazy, because I questioned everything. And I was like, this doesn't seem right. This is not right. This is not how people do things. So I am enough. And that's still hard to this day because it does. There's a lot of, well, I find my worth in other people and how much I can give to them versus me sitting back and saying, "No, I'm okay. If they want this, that's fine. I'm offering it, but I don't have to give it because."
I wanna talk about the person who's listening right now, that one woman who's listening to your journey, your story, who's actually going through something at this very moment. They're looking for, you've been there, just looking for that little spark, that little something that says, "I'm worthy. I mean something to someone." What kind of advice or a first step do they need to take, that or advice that you would like to give?
Reach out. Who would you call at 2 o'clock in the morning and they would answer the phone and come running? And if you have that person, reach out and tell them what's going on and how you feel. And if you don't have that person, find one. Whether it's the neighbor up the street, there has to be someone. Find a way to start healing yourself because a lot of people can't afford therapy. A lot of people can't afford, what I said was EMDR or the mental emotional release techniques or anything like that. I couldn't. I started with books. I started with Napoleon Hill. Dale Carnegie's a little hard to read, but I started, with Wayne Dyer. And it wasn't as weird as this sounds. I started with Sylvia Brown because I was like, I knew that there was something else out there. And the religion that my parents were a part of, the religion that I was a part of was very blind eye to the abuses that were going on. And the boarding school that I was sent up to New York was a very religious boarding school. And so I was very anti-religion. But I knew that there was something else. I would say just keep looking, keep going.
Isn't that one of the hardest things, though, is getting past that fear of being open to somebody because you're scared. You're scared to tell the truth. You're scared to say what's really going on. And if that is the case, then how do they get past that fearful part to break that barrier that does allow them to start opening the door to recovery and dealing with the trauma?
Well, I will say that, I was shouting ever since I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I was shouting from the rooftops what was going on. I was going to neighbors. I was telling my pastor and our youth pastor and our teachers, and I was shut down every time. I was told, well, your parents are godly people. They would never do that. You're lying. You're this, you're that. I was constantly told that I was the problem. And it really took, I speak about November 28th, 2011. It was the night before and the night after, that how bad does it have to be until you make the change, until you come out and say, no more, this ends with me. And that was the night that it ended with that was no more. I mean, I was face down on the floor getting punched by my kids and my ex, and police were called. So bad that the diamond came out of my engagement ring. That was it. I was done. I left with 4 boxes. Now, healing that afterwards, I'm not going to say that it's roses. I'm not going to say that it's, cream. It was the hard healing's the hardest thing I did afterwards. And honestly, if I didn't have those 3 women that, stood by me, I would have went back to him. I would have went back to that life because it was easier to do that because it's everything that I knew than it was to stand up and say within myself, I deserve more. And those 3 women kept me and said, I deserve more. And they acknowledged the crap that I had been going through. Fear is a very powerful thing. And yet on the other side, it's so freeing. It really is.
For somebody who is in that role of being a friend or a family member who knows of somebody who's going through a situation, what can that person do?
So there's a very fine line. There are people in my life when I was going through that would say, "Oh, you'll just get through it. It'll just get easier." Well, you can't see the forest through the trees. So what I would say is give them a book. It doesn't have to be my book. There's tons of other books out there. Give them the book. Be that shoulder when they cry on, you know, be that 2 o'clock in the morning person that they can call because you know, when I tried committing suicide, one of the times I called that 2 o'clock in the morning person, and again, she's one of the people that saved my life. She was that very strong person. So be that person for if you know someone's going through this, be that person. And you don't have to say. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes you just come over and you sit in silence. Yes, I was very fortunate that I found my husband and he has helped me and we've built this journey together. And I have no doubt that if it wasn't, if he wasn't in my life, I would have found somebody else. There was always going to be this community that I was building around me, uh, that I was manifesting, that I was going to be bigger than myself.
Your story is so powerful, and I know we just kind of covered the top, layer of what was going on in your life, and we did that for a reason. How can people find out more information about the program, what you can do for them?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a website called the resiliency-blueprint.com. The book is called The Resiliency Blueprint, a life guide to being a life guide to being seen, safe, and loved. That is on Amazon. It is soon going to be on Ngram. And that in the website, you can also find the coaching program. And then 20% of all the proceeds from the coaching program and the book sales goes towards OK Ranch. And on our website, OK Ranch has a designated page.
Well, I have one final question for you, Michelle, and it's one I usually leave for my guests to answer this question. And as you know, the name of the podcast is Eagle Freedom Presents. My question to you: you've obviously gone through a lot. You really are. You're an inspiration to, I think, to a lot of women to know that there's help out there, that there's hope for them. What does freedom mean to you?
So, freedom to me is the act of resilience. So, there's resilience and there's resiliency. And resiliency is, I believe, is the act of resilience. So, it's resilience in motion. And it's my ability to perform at a level that I never thought was possible. Because if I can perform at that level, then my wealth is taking all of the things that you think that freedom is, time freedom, wealth freedom, emotional freedom, all of that is based on what I can create and what I can manifest. And if I am acting in a way and I'm performing in a way that my mind then is able to create possibilities, that's freedom for me.
Well, listen, Michelle, I want to thank you very much for sharing your story, your journey with me and my audience. Continue best of luck to you with OK Ranch. I think that's an amazing thing that you're doing. And again, just thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin, and I really appreciate the time that you've taken and the questions that you've asked. That was awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And for our audience out there, what's the one golden nugget that you got out of our conversation today? Be sure to put it in the comments below. And I just want to remind you that at Eagle Freedom Presents, we're building a global movement. It's called the Rio Movement, and the Rio Movement is built on the mantra of rise, inspire, and overcome. And we can only do that thanks to your help. Help us reach out to the global community. Like, subscribe, comment, and share to this episode. And again, remember that you too can rise, inspire, and overcome. God bless.